Welcome back. News Gang continues. I want us to step away from the state of the nation, state of the handshake, state of other states, to discuss the state of the Huduma Namba. Look, when President Uhuru Kenyatta launched this registration in Machakos, his deputy was supposed to be in Kakamega. He was a no-show. He tried to explain why he didn't go there. But of course, that explanation didn't seem to sink very well. That's a story for another day. The other leaders were elsewhere. Raila Odinga was in Mombasa. Kalonzo Musyoka was in Murang'a. And Musalia Mudavadi was in Kajiado. Was it Kajiado or Narok? Kajiado.
Yes, he was in Kajiado.
But there are still pertinent questions that are being raised about the Huduma Namba. In fact, some people are still questioning why now. Two, why wouldn't it wait until the census registration so that the two activities can go side by side? Because, I mean, you're targeting the same people, using the same resources, in the same environment, same logistics, and so on and so forth. But let's listen first to what the Principal Secretary in the Interior Affairs docket had to say about the ongoing registration.
Ukikuwa registered pale, kwa maisha yako yote, hakuna mtu ataenda kuuliza tena fingerprints zako, hakuna mtu tena ataenda kuuliza picha yako, juu serikali itakuwa imeshika hiyo information na imeweka kwa debe moja.
This is supposed to improve our ability to provide Kenyans with a service that they truly deserve and desire.
Kwa sababu wengine wamekimbia mahakamani. Ati wanapinga. Mimi nauliza wanapinga nini? Dada mahakama nasema ati hiyo ni lazima, sijui nini. Ikiwa kama kungekuwa kitu ambacho inatakana hiyo ni lazima ni hii.
With this number, a lot of things that have been going wrong shall be able to be dealt with.
Tukimaliza this project, mimi sioni haja ya kufanya voter registration tena. Kusema kweli,
lazima tuendelee kuhudumia kila mtu, mwenye kadi, mwenye hana kadi, mpaka kila mtu apate kadi.
Yvonne, look at how all the then opposition leaders, somebody has said on Twitter, they are falling over themselves, supporting the registration. Suppose it was a few weeks, a few months ago, maybe a year or so ago, things would have been different. But be it as it may, some are also saying that this was also probably some genius by the president to rope them in such that in the event the registration goes wrong, they will have no moral authority to say...
That's exactly my... Who is asking the critical questions about this? Who is questioning it? And by questioning, it doesn't mean...
opposing or rejecting.
As the PS said, you know, there's people who want it bad for us. I mean, I think Kenyans have a right to question, and you would automatically imagine that that would be the leaders that we have seen saying, you know, now we don't need a voter registration. A number of the questions that still remain is data protection. The president talked about it and he said, oh, we're formulating a law. That's fine. However, there have been several attempts at getting a data and content protection law in this country. In 2018, Senator Gideon Moi came up with a bill in the Senate. He asked for public participation. C.S. Musharu has also had that bill. These bills, the proposal is to merge them. Discuss this. Do we put the cart before the horse? We will do it. Okay, when? But you've already started the registration. It might have addressed some of the issues and the questions people have. The president has said, you know, this will help us, and he said it constantly, this will help us give you services. Okay, how? The one thing we've not told people is how it'll make things different from the way they are now. Let me also say this. The president, I know, addressed the issue of 666 and Mpango Wakando, and the way he addressed it, listen, matters of faith are very serious matters. We believe what we believe, whether they are true or not. But when people have questions, it cannot be, Jameni, sasa ni mambo ya 666. I mean, would you just answer the questions and say, it is not 666, this is why, this is what it is? There just needs to be more effort at getting buy-in from the people. Those questions on data protection are not for nothing. Cambridge Analytica came into this country, did what they did with our data. We were unable to prosecute them. Why? Because we don't have laws in this country. In other countries, they've been censured for some of the mischief that they did using our data. Data is big business, not just in this country, but around the world. And those questions remain unanswered. We're told your data is safe. Thank you. How?
When you speak about data is safe or not, it brings me on to the whole question of this registration exercise, whether it is lazima or not. I say this because of a ruling by Justices Weldon Corinne, Pauline Nyamweya and Mumbi Ngugi, who ruled that it is not a must for Kenyans to register for the Huduma Namba. It barred the government also from using the data to withhold any services or bar anyone from accessing public facilities. However, and also that the government cannot also share the collected information with international bodies, the issue about data safety.
Right.
But the president, when he spoke at the launch in Machakos County at Masi Boys High School, said lazima kila mtu ajisajili akuwe na Huduma Namba kuanzia miaka 6 kwenda mbele. They have to be registered. And the other issue that comes up is this. For instance, about whether it's a must or not, in Machakos County, there was even a circular that went around to all employees of the county that they will not get their May salaries if you do not have...
Dr. Mutua disowned it yesterday on JKL.
Yeah, maybe it disowned it. But this is one of the issues that comes up because the president said, they were able to recover, I think, I'm not sure, some millions because they found out that, there were some officers who had been come across...
1.1 billion every year. Now, what I think they are also practical, beyond the previously questions, there are people who are raising practical questions about this thing, and I was looking at a document that's been authored by 2 professionals. They call themselves informaticians, but these are prominent people like Dr. Shemo Chwodo, who of course is an ICT expert in this country, George Njuguna, who was named CIO of the year 2018, Chief Information Officer of the year 2018. And they're saying that there are a number of systems that are already in existence that capture in some way or other the very information that this thing seeks to get. First of all, there is the Integrated Population Registration System, which is run by the Ministry of Interior, and it is described as a source of truth by the Ministry, a one-stop shop, if you like. And so, according to this gentleman, there's no convincing technical reason why we can't simply upgrade that it is called IPRS. There's also the National Registration Bureau, which is responsible for identification, registration, and issuance of identity cards to all persons, and then it has an electronic sort of database for refugees and other nationals. There is the election that we do every 5 years, and every time we do voter registration, and now this information is captured digitally, and we were told that the whole BVR thing can capture facial images, fingerprints, several data, and other information, gender, identity card number, and all of those things. Then we have NEMIS, which is being run in schools. So the president said 6 years going up. These are people who are in high school and primary schools, and the information is being put in this database. So in a sense, these people are saying overall there is no technical basis for NIMS that the systems listed above cannot address in technical terms. So in other words, they're saying all these systems that we have, there is a sense in which they capture all this information that we are looking for, and in a country where we could do with whatever billions, is it 6 that we are dealing with?
I want to introduce Linus to this. Sorry, Linus, we are turning you into a spectator a little bit, but no, look,
I'm enjoying that.
Yes. Is it a question of communication or miscommunication of this registration? Because, I mean, there doesn't seem to be a lot of excitement about this registration. If it was such a good thing the way the government is saying, there will be palpable excitement across the country. Is it a question of how the government is communicating this, and maybe the threat that if you don't register, you won't get services, and so Kenyans are like, okay, let's see utadu, the rebellion and the consequences kind of a situation?
Francis, you remember we tackled this issue at great length on the same evening that Yvonne interviewed the PS for Internal Security, Mr. Karanja Kibichu. You remember that night. And one thing that came up that time, and it does come right now, is also just how the government is communicating. Who are the ambassadors of the government? It's very, very good that they've gotten all the top political leadership to back up this exercise. Now they need to move to the next level, which is the level below it. Not even PSs, but the people who now actually do the regular job. There's a civic education sort of exercise to let people know what this number is all about. For me, I think as a country we're making a big deal for nothing. This is just part of the digitization process that we need to embrace. We need to have all these things in one portal. We should be able to actually identify people biometrically. I think it's a very good exercise. It's forward-moving for the country. And I think Joe explained it quite accurately. Going forward, we'll need to also think that whether that same information or that same portal can capture all these other cards that we have. You have your passport details there. You have national ID there. In the US, they do have a social security number, which is 6 digits. And the use is slightly different. I've seen it being thrown around as an example of what NIMS is trying to achieve, but it's not. Because in the US, what the social security number entitles you to is a job if you don't have one, or social security services and benefits from the government if you are a beneficiary. Those are the two purposes itself. So it's not exactly what NIMS is trying to achieve.
Linus, you spoke about how we have the IDs and the passports, and Nyagaka Nyakundi on Twitter says, on this suspicious, he calls it suspicious Huduma number, I wonder how many times this government wants to register us. I have over 5 government numbers, so I read mischief and mischief, that's what he says. And it also brings us the whole issue of people, do they really understand what this Huduma number is? I remember when we did the Vox Pops, when they did the trial, people in Kisumu were saying they don't understand what it is. Tunataka kujua hapa ni ya nini. Was there public participation done before we launched this whole process of Huduma Namba? Number 2, what exactly does it mean for a Kenyan yule yuko kule mashinani? I don't think a lot of information has been taken to the ground to explain to everybody what this means for them personally, as an individual. Kule kwetu ainamoi Kericho inamsaidia vipi mama yangu?
But the PS said, was it today?
Which is why, Jamila, they need to change. They need to change their strategy in terms of how they are communicating with the public. This is not a political rally thing where you'll have the opposition leader, the president. I think it should come down to exactly the same way we register voters, for example. The exercise the IBC carries out before every election. It's normally low-key, but people interact at a level that they understand each other. The registration officer comes from your village, so you know what he's doing. There's an element of trust that needs to be built so that it stops looking like something imposed by the informal coalition government.
I'm looking at a very interesting tweet coming from a gentleman called Matelong. He's saying e-citizen platform was never forced on anyone, but you got yourself registering due to the service you want. Same thing to this Huduma number. You will be forced to register out of inconvenience of the services you will need. But, well, the government seems to explain that this will make it very easy for you to access government services. I mean, you will not need to carry so many cards. One card will be sufficient. Then why the suspicion, Yvonne? Why the suspicion?
Because I think what Linus has been talking about in terms of it being a communication issue. And just like what happens before elections, there's this whole civic education exercise. So they are everywhere and they're answering, those very simple questions. Kujisajili na IBC na maanisha nini? Those are some of the very key, very basic questions that they answer. We're seeing a lot of defensiveness. So it's when you ask a question, you get rebuffed. And that was the sense I got when I interviewed the PS. No, this is not a bad thing. And I think in this country, especially with government officials, questioning doesn't mean you are against it. Questioning means you want to understand it better. And therefore, once you do, you have a higher chance of people supporting you in this. Here are a couple of questions that I asked him that day, and I continue to ask today, that remain unanswered. Has the government told us about security breaches and how they plan to assure security? Who stores this data? Who analyzes it? What are the rights of the citizens to this data? Let's talk about access to information. The president promised fellow journalist Mark Masai the deals regarding China and the port of Mombasa. In fact, as I understand it, NTV put in a request for access to information. A formal request. It's been 97 days, I think, or maybe 98 now, since that information came in. So this is how information is handled. It's kept, very close to the chest by the government. So if I have registered on Huduma Namba and I want access to my details, how do I go about that? If there is a a misspell, if my ID number is incorrect. I mean, like right now with my driver's license, you would be surprised at how my name has been spelled. It's a completely different person. How do you start to make those changes? And these are the questions that Kenyans want simple answers to. It's not that the questions they're asking mean, as the PS was saying today, that they wish bad for this thing. They just want answers. But let me finish. If they have issues, who do you complain to? If there is somebody in the government who has overreach, I mean, we're not saying government is good, we're not saying it's bad, but there are certain individuals who might want to use this information for profiling, who might want to use it to discriminate. What are the laws in place to deal with Francis Gachuri if he has access to this information and he uses it in a way that is not fit? Remember, it also increases the possibility of state surveillance without a law that does not exist to set responsibilities for the persons who are handling this data. I mean, these are just a number of the questions that we would just do well to answer, each of them one by one, rather than the defense that we're seeing.
Yvonne, you're so right, because some of these questions are very basic. For instance, someone was asking me today, where can I go register? They don't even know where they can, which is the nearest place I can go register. You kwa assistant chief, kwa chief, ama Huduma Center offices. Just such simple questions have not been answered. And when you look like at some time when you were studying in development communication, when you're trying to introduce something new to a community, you involve them so that it is successful. You talk to them from the beginning.
They will be your champions.
They'll be your champions.
But isn't that why they probably involved all these other politicians in there? Because, I mean, they were everywhere in the country. In Mombasa, there was, I think, Kajiado, where Musalia Mudavadi was, and Kalonzo Musyoka. So to that extent, I think that the idea around that, I mean, all the conspiracy
the politicians are telling us exactly what the government is saying.
They're not answering the question.
They're not answering the questions, which is, hii ni kitu mzuri, now we don't need to do this. I mean, a little something, a little more organic.
Yeah, I mean, but these are the same politicians, remember. I mean, in Kenya, it tends to work like that, because these are the same politicians who told us about the new constitution, and people would say, kama baba amesoma.
Okay.
In fact, in Kisumu yesterday...
Why do I need to do that? You understand? So probably that's what the government is riding on, because it has happened many, many times before. And I was hoping we would bring in Kai on that question.
In fact, before you invoke Kai, I've seen somebody on a Facebook post say, tunangoja tuone kama Ruto ataregister ndio tuende. But before you go there,
Gachuri, let me just on the same thing. Kisumu yesterday and the environs, they were unable to continue registering people because the forms zilikuwa zimeshakwisha. Kwa sababu the ones that were brought there the first day zilikuwa zimeshakwisha. Baba alisema to register. So everybody turned out and they registered.
They say 150,000 people have registered so far.
Yes, so are those people asking the questions that we're asking tonight? So it's also a question of whether people really know what they're engaging in, they know what even their rights are, or the dangers that this thing can pose and that sort of thing.
Our foreign gangster, Linus. Now, look, people are also looking at the figures. When you hear a project of about 6 billion shillings, the suspicion kicks in that this probably is another vendor-driven project. Would that be a valid concern for people who are raising questions about the registration?
Very, very valid. Very valid concern. I mean, once bitten, twice shy. Every big project in this country has created a number of billionaires. So will the NIMS project. No doubt about it. Who is doing it? Who is handling it? I think it's MOFO, the same group that did. They've been around for a while now. I don't have the details with me here, but that's what I hear. That is the group that is behind the project. So that is part of the concern. But I don't think it overshadows the mere suspicion of the ordinary Kenyans who are saying, we don't understand what this is all about. Joe had earlier asked about the participation, broad participation by the politicians. I think this is simply informed by the fact that this is such a low-risk project politically. It will cost you nothing. It will make Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, and Raila Odinga look like they are backing Uhuru Kenyatta in a big thing. But this is not as big as corruption cases, for example, would be. Here they can stake their political lives because there's no risk. It's a very, very low risk. Would they, on big issues, especially when they start talking about changing the constitution? Let's see about that. So NIMS is a very low-risk project. It's good for political entertainment. You start showing political support because there's very little you can lose, even if it goes wrong.
We need to remember that this Huduma project is costing 6 billion.
But there could be that danger if tomorrow we discover it's a big scandal, then who's going to talk about it? These guys would actually already have immersed themselves in this thing. They would basically not, unless, of course, we know some of them, maybe as they say, Baba can come tomorrow and say, "Mini lingia huko ndani like ilianza vizuri lakini
so maybe they can warn them.
Find a way around it.
Guys, I think, Joe, if I can just quickly chip in. Right now, with what has been happening on the anti-corruption front, people being taken to court, I don't have any figures, but I think suddenly there's a drop in the appetite for corruption. It's too risky to touch things right now. Kinoti is there, you don't know who is watching. DPP is eager to take people to the dock. So I think in the last few months, I don't think we have new corruption cases. I really doubt that.
Okay.
But at the same time, even as we say all these things, this is a government project. So the leaders who are not necessarily in government, they can always say, sisi tuliunga mkono kwa sababu tulidhani ni kitu mzuri, lakini huko katikati kaharibika, so they can always escape
Well,
it.
I have a few questions, because if they went, were they given per diem or out-of-pocket allowance? And where did that money come from?
I'm sure you know who would answer that question.
Yes.
They're not on this.
I thought I would. I'll just raise that one. But let me just end with a question that Patrick Gadara has asked on Twitter, which is what I was asking in the beginning. What exactly are the services that GOK, the government, has been unable to provide until now?
That it will be able to provide.
Will be able to provide with the Huduma number. Just some key questions. If they can tell us that, then we'll be okay. And I remember, I think C.S. Mushere said on radio yesterday, was it today? He had an interview on one of the local radio stations, and he said, if you want to cook, a meal for your family, you want to know how many members of your family that you have. But we usually have a census, and there's the national.
Omambia Masisa Vincent says on Twitter, Yvonne, and I find in just one line, I am not tired of carrying my cards. That's why I don't need to.
Like public participation. Who asked me what I want?
Boils down to that question that Linas was answering to, communication. Probably the government will need to communicate this registration better, assuage the fears of Kenyans that this is not ill-intentioned, the data is protected, and all these questions that the people are asking, they need to respond to those questions. And not in a defensive manner, but respond to them one after the other in a convincing manner. Probably that will make the idea more sellable. But ultimately, there are also questions about prudent management of resources. I mean, in August or thereabout, we will be having a census. If you're asking people in Banana to register for NIMS, and then you'll be back in August to ask questions that are also personal and related to the same data, somebody is asking, why not combine the two registrations and ultimately come up with broader data that can now be classified into various components, and ultimately you will end up having the same accuracy, so to say, in fact broadly, and at a slightly lower cost.
Surely this one is costing us 6 billion shillings, the Huduma number one. I shudder to think how much the census will cost us, and the referendum we will have it this year.
More than double that amount.
More than double that amount. And Wahome Kaburu says, my 2 cents, while all our attention is diverted to the Huduma number registration charade, those 45 days are enough to incubate and hatch enough corruption scandals. Thank me later, he says. Linas, you're about to wind up. Your final thoughts before we let you go?
I think Huduma is a good idea. I think we should digitize a lot of these records. We should be able to know who our neighbors, who you are when you appear in a government service center, or even in a police station as a suspect. You should be able to run some of those details really quickly and find out who there is. State of the Nation speech, underwhelming. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Linas. We hope to have you back here next week. Have a safe journey back.
Can I read a quick one from a gentleman here called Sifuna? He's saying, I think the government should phase out identity cards. Huduma number should serve the same purpose as ID number. Gava iache kutupima. I will not say what he says.
And here's a funny one. Can we end with this one? Yeah. Brian Odhiambo Omolo says, "Woi, my decoder card has expired. You should do something with Newsgang to also be on Radio Citizen." But he's still watching us through his neighbor's TV in Mombasa, Likon.
And has had that.
And Moses Kiare, this I have to finish, Yvonne. Moses Kiare says, "I have not registered and I'm not registering for Huduma Namba. I haven't understood why I need it so badly. I'm not tired of carrying my other cards." And we are ending it tonight.
We'll put it on visual radio.
On visual, oh, yeah, oh, well, okay.